The shattering of fine china didn't just break the silence of the Plaza Hotel's grand ballroom, it fractured a billion-dollar conspiracy. One moment, Arthur Sterling was the untouchable titan of New York real estate, holding court with a glass of vintage scotch. The next, he was sprinting through a grease-stained kitchen, his tuxedo ruined, guided only by a 24-year-old waitress he had never looked in the eye before. Most people assume the rich are insulated by their money, but that night proved that when the wolves are at the door, a bank account can't save you. Sometimes, all that stands between a tycoon and a bullet is a girl with a heavy tray and the courage to drop it. The Sterling Foundation Gala was the kind of event where the air conditioning smelled like expensive perfume and the floral arrangements cost more than a 4-year college degree. It was held in the grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel on Fifth Avenue, a venue that practically leaked old New York money. For Cassidy Cass Miller, however, it smelled like aching feet and suppressed anxiety. Cass adjusted the collar of her stiff white uniform, checking her reflection in the polished brass of a service cart. She was invisible. That was the first rule of high-end service: be present, but absent. Refill the wine before the glass is empty, clear the plate the second the fork is set down, and never, ever make eye contact unless spoken to. At 24, with student loans drowning her and a rent payment in Queens 2 weeks overdue, Cass had mastered the art of invisibility. Tonight was different. The tension in the room wasn't just social posturing. It was palpable, sharp, and dangerous. The guest of honor was Arthur Sterling. At 62, Sterling was a legend. He was the man who built the skyline, a billionaire with a reputation for being ruthless in the boardroom, but surprisingly gentle with his charitable causes. He sat at table 1, the king's table, surrounded by sycophants, board members, and his head of security, a man named Gideon Graves. Cass didn't like Graves. He had eyes like a shark, dead, flat, and moving over the room as if assessing prey. The trouble started at 7:45 p.m., 45 minutes before the main speech. Cass had been sent to the back corridor, a narrow service hallway connecting the ballroom to the prep kitchen, to fetch more linen napkins. The hallway was dimly lit, lined with stacks of chairs and unused equipment. As she rounded the corner near the service elevator, she heard hushed, aggressive voices. "Tonight, Gideon. It has to be tonight." Cass froze. She recognized the voice. It was distinctively raspy. Roger Thorne, Arthur Sterling's CFO and oldest friend. "It's too public, Roger," a deeper voice replied. Gideon Graves. "There are 300 cameras in there." "That's the point," Thorne snapped. "He announces the restructuring of the assets tomorrow morning. If he signs those papers, the board loses control of the conglomerate. He's going to donate 60% of the holdings to that damn trust. We need him incapacitated before the market opens." Cass pressed herself against the wall, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She held her breath, clutching the stack of linen so tight her knuckles turned white. "The insulin," Gideon said, his voice dropping an octave. "I swapped his pen in the coat check. It's not insulin. It's a concentrated dose of digoxin. It'll look like a massive heart attack. When he feels faint, I'll escort him to the private medical suite we set up upstairs." "He never makes it to the hospital." "And the girl?" Thorne asked. "The one pouring his water?" "Collateral," Gideon grunted. "If she sees anything, she goes down too. Make sure the cameras in the East Hall are looped." Cass felt the blood drain from her face. Digoxin. A heart attack. They weren't just going to kill him. They were going to do it in front of 500 witnesses and make it look natural. And the girl pouring his water. That was her. She was assigned to table 1. She heard footsteps approaching. Panic, cold and electric, shot through her. She couldn't run back to the kitchen without being seen. She spotted a laundry chute door slightly ajar. Without thinking, she slid inside the small alcove just as Gideon and Thorne walked past. "Run the play when the entree drops," Gideon said. 9 p.m. Cass waited until their footsteps faded into the hum of the ballroom. She checked her cheap digital watch. It was 8:15 p.m. She had 45 minutes. Her first instinct was to run. Just leave. Walk out the service entrance. Take the N train back to Astoria and pretend she never saw a thing. But then she thought of Arthur Sterling. She thought of the library he had built in her neighborhood. The one where she studied for her GED. He wasn't just a suit. He was a human being about to be betrayed by the people he trusted most. She pushed out of the alcove. Her hands were shaking. She needed a plan. If she went to the police, Gideon, who ran security, would intercept her. If she told a manager, they'd think she was crazy, or worse, alert Gideon. She had to tell Arthur. But how? He was surrounded by a fortress of people who wanted him dead. Cass composed herself, smoothed her apron, and walked back into the ballroom. The noise hit her, a wall of laughter, clinking crystal, and a string quartet playing Vivaldi. It felt grotesque now, a funeral march disguised as a celebration. She made her way to table 1. Arthur Sterling was laughing, a deep, booming sound that made the lines around his eyes crinkle. He looked healthy, vibrant, and completely unaware that the man standing 6 feet behind him, Gideon Graves, was waiting for him to die. Cass picked up a silver water pitcher. Her palms were sweating. She approached the table. "More water, Mr. Sterling?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. Arthur looked up. He had kind eyes, surprisingly blue. "Please, my dear. Thank you." As she leaned in to pour, Gideon took a step forward, his hand hovering near his earpiece. He was watching her. She couldn't say it. Not out loud. She poured the water, her mind racing. She needed a distraction. She needed chaos. The plan formed in her head instantly. It was reckless, stupid, and likely to get her fired or killed. But it was the only way. She circled the table, clearing empty appetizer plates. 8:45 p.m., 15 minutes left. She went back to the kitchen. "Chef!" she called out to the sous chef, a frantic man named Pierre. "Table 1 is ready for the mains." No, 5 minutes," Pierre shouted. "Mr. Sterling is asking for it now," she lied smoothly. "He's feeling faint. He wants to eat and leave." Pierre cursed but started plating the filet mignon. Cass grabbed the massive, heavy silver tray. It was loaded with 4 plates, heavy gravy boats, and steak knives. She walked back out. 8:52 p.m. She approached table 1. Gideon was now standing directly behind Arthur, leaning in to whisper something, likely the precursor to the medical emergency. Cass took a deep breath. This was it. She walked up to Arthur's right side. She leaned in, ostensibly to place a steak knife. "Mr. Sterling," she breathed, barely moving her lips. He paused, looking at her, confused. "Don't look at me," she whispered, her voice a razor-thin wire of intensity. "The insulin is poison. Graves is going to kill you." Arthur stiffened. His eyes darted to Gideon, then back to his plate. He was a smart man. He didn't panic, but he hesitated. "Who are—" he started. "Run when I drop the tray," she commanded. And then she let go. The sound was apocalyptic. The heavy silver tray, laden with porcelain plates and steel cutlery, hit the marble floor with a violence that silenced the room instantly. Gravy splattered onto the pristine tablecloths and the hemlines of expensive gowns. Shards of china flew like shrapnel. "Oh my God!" Cass screamed, feigning a trip. She threw herself forward, effectively tackling Arthur Sterling out of his chair. It looked like a clumsy accident, a waitress losing her balance and knocking the billionaire over to save him from the mess. But in reality, she was shoving him toward the gap in the velvet ropes. "Go!" she hissed into his ear as they hit the floor. Gideon Graves reacted instantly. He didn't look concerned about the mess. His hand went straight inside his jacket for a weapon. "Secure the target!" he barked into his lapel mic. Arthur Sterling, adrenaline flooding his system, scrambled up. He looked at Cass, then at Gideon. He saw the cold, murderous intent in his security chief's eyes. The realization hit him like a physical blow. The waitress was right. "This way." Cass grabbed Arthur's sleeve, pulling him not toward the main exit, but toward the service doors used by the staff. "My security team," Arthur stammered, stumbling over a broken plate. "They are the threat," Cass yelled, abandoning all protocol. They sprinted toward the swinging kitchen doors just as 3 large men in dark suits detached themselves from the perimeter and started running toward them. "Stop them!" Gideon roared, pointing a finger. "He's having a medical episode. He's delirious." The crowd gasped, confused. Was this a kidnapping? A medical emergency? Cass burst through the double doors into the kitchen, Arthur close on her heels. The kitchen was a labyrinth of stainless steel, steam, and shouting cooks. "Move, move!" Cass shouted, shoving a cart of dirty dishes into the path behind them. "Mademoiselle, what are you doing?" Pierre screamed, waving a ladle. "Fire!" Cass yelled. "There's a fire in the ballroom." Panic erupted in the kitchen. Staff began to scramble, creating a human shield of confusion. Cass dragged Arthur through the prep station, past the butchery, and toward the loading dock. "My car is out front," Arthur panted, his face red. He wasn't built for sprinting. "No," Cass said, kicking open the heavy steel door to the loading dock. "They'll be waiting there. We have to go to the street." They burst out into the cool night air of 58th Street. It was raining, a cold, miserable New York drizzle. "Mr. Sterling," a voice boomed from the loading dock behind them. One of Gideon's men had cleared the kitchen. He raised a suppressed pistol. Phut. A bullet sparked against the brick wall inches from Arthur's head. Arthur froze, staring at the chip in the brick. The reality of his mortality had just missed him by an inch. "Run!" Cass screamed, grabbing his hand. They bolted down the alleyway, splashing through puddles. They emerged onto 6th Avenue, the lights of the city blinding and disorienting. Traffic was gridlocked. Horns blared. "Taxi!" Arthur waved his hand frantically. "No taxis," Cass said, pulling him back. "They can track credit cards, and you don't have cash. We need the subway." "The subway?" Arthur looked at her as if she had suggested they fly to the moon. "I haven't taken the subway since 1982. "Well, welcome back to the real world," Cass snapped. They ran down the stairs of the 57th Street station. Cass vaulted the turnstile. "Jump it! I can't jump that! Jump it or die, Mr. Sterling." Arthur Sterling, a man worth $12 billion, hiked up his tuxedo trousers and awkwardly clambered over the turnstile, just as Gideon's men reached the top of the stairs. Cass grabbed him and pulled him onto a waiting F train, just as the doors chimed and hissed shut. As the train pulled away, accelerating into the dark tunnel, Arthur slumped against the graffiti-covered door, sliding down until he hit the floor. He gasped for air, clutching his chest. Cass stood over him, her chest heaving, her white uniform stained with gravy and street grime. She looked at the man at her feet. "Are you okay?" she asked. Arthur looked up, his eyes wide with shock. You saved my life." "Yeah, well," Cass wiped rain from her forehead. "Don't fire me." The F-train rattled and screeched, rocking them back and forth. The car was mostly empty. A few tired commuters, a teenager with headphones, and a sleeping homeless man. No one paid attention to the older man in the ruined tuxedo or the waitress who looked like she'd been in a food fight. Arthur Sterling was trembling. It wasn't the cold. It was the aftershock. "Why?" Arthur asked, his voice hoarse. "Why would Gideon—" "I treated him like a son." Cass sat opposite him on the hard, orange plastic seat. "I heard him talking to Roger Thorne. They wanted to stop you from signing the papers tomorrow. The asset transfer." Arthur closed his eyes, his head hitting the glass partition behind him. "The trust. I'm moving the majority of the Sterling Group's voting shares into a charitable trust. It cuts the board out of the loop. It stops them from selling off the affordable housing division." "Well," Cass said dryly, "they seem to disagree with your business strategy." Arthur reached into his jacket pocket. "My phone. I need to call the police commissioner. Frank is a good man." "Don't," Cass said sharply. Arthur paused, phone halfway out. "Why?" "Because Gideon Graves is ex-NYPD, Cass said. "He hired half his security team from the force. If you turn that phone on, they can triangulate your location in seconds. And if you call the cops, how do you know the person showing up isn't on Gideon's payroll?" Arthur stared at the phone, then slowly put it back. He looked old, suddenly. Defeated. "So, what do we do? I can't hide in the subway forever." "We go to my place," Cass said. "It's off the books. No one knows you're there. We figure out a plan." "Where do you live?" "Astoria. Just a few more stops." 30 minutes later, they were walking down a quiet, tree-lined street in Queens. The houses were modest, brick row homes with small porches. Cass led him to a basement apartment with a rusted gate. She unlocked the door, flipping on a flickering fluorescent light. The apartment was tiny, a studio with a pull-out couch, a kitchenette, and stacks of books everywhere. It smelled of vanilla candles and old paper. "It's not the plaza," Cass muttered, locking the 3 deadbolts on the door. "But it's safe." Arthur looked around, taking in the cramped space. He saw a pile of textbooks on the small table. Advanced macroeconomics, corporate law, international relations. He picked one up. "You're a student?" "I was," Cass said, opening the fridge and tossing him a bottle of water. "Dropped out last year. Dad got sick. Medical bills don't pay themselves." Arthur took the water. He looked at the girl, really looked at her, for the first time. She had sharp features, intelligent green eyes, and a toughness that reminded him of his own mother, who had raised him in Hell's Kitchen before he made his fortune. "I'm sorry," Arthur said softly. "About your father." "He passed 3 months ago," Cass said, turning away to hide the flash of grief. "Anyway, we need to focus. You said the signing is tomorrow?" 9 a.m. at the Sterling Tower. If I'm not there to sign, the motion defaults, and the current board retains control for another fiscal year. They'll gut the company by noon. So we have, Cass checked her watch, 9 hours to keep you alive and get you into that building. "We can't just walk in," Arthur said, pacing the small room. "Gideon controls the building security. He'll have my face flagged in the system. The moment I step into the lobby, the elevators will lock down, and his men will swarm me." "Is there another way in?" Arthur shook his head. "It's a fortress, private elevators, retinal scanners. The only way into the boardroom is the executive lift." Cass bit her lip, thinking. She paced the room, stepping over a pile of laundry. "Okay. If we can't go through the front door, we need leverage. We need to prove they tried to kill you. If we send proof to the FBI or the press, Gideon has to run." "Proof?" Arthur scoffed. "It's my word against theirs. They'll say I'm senile. Gideon has probably already doctored the security footage from the hotel." "Not all of it," Cass said. Her eyes lit up. "Wait. You said Gideon swapped your insulin pen?" "Yes." "Where is it?" Arthur patted his pockets. He pulled out a sleek, silver medical case. Inside was an injection pen. "He gave it back to me right before dinner," Arthur said. "He expected me to use it after the meal." Cass grabbed the pen carefully with a napkin. "If this is full of digoxin, this is the murder weapon. It has his prints on it." Arthur looked at the pen with horror. "We need to get this analyzed. But where?" "At 2:00 a.m. Cass smiled, a grim, tight smile. "I know a guy. He's a vet student at NYU. He works the night shift at the 24-hour animal hospital in Long Island City. They have a toxicology lab." Arthur stared at her. "You want to test the assassination weapon intended for a billionaire at a vet clinic? Do you have a better idea, Mr. Sterling?" Arthur sighed, buttoning his ruined tuxedo jacket. "Lead the way, Miss Miller." The rain had turned from a drizzle into a deluge, washing the grime of New York City into the gutters. Long Island City at 3 a.m. was a ghost town of industrial warehouses and sleek new high-rise condos that felt out of place against the rusted train tracks. Cass Miller and Arthur Sterling walked briskly, heads down. Arthur had discarded his ruined tuxedo jacket, shivering in his dress shirt, which was now translucent with rain. He looked less like a titan of industry and more like a drowned rat. "How much further?" Arthur chattered, his teeth clicking together. 2 blocks, Cass said, scanning the street. She was looking for black SUVs, for lingering pedestrians, for anything out of place. Paranoia was a cold itch at the base of her skull. "Walk faster. You look suspicious." "I look suspicious?" Arthur scoffed, stepping over a puddle. "I look like I've been mugged, which, in a corporate sense, I have." They reached a nondescript brick building with a neon sign buzzing in the window. Queen's Plaza. 24-hour veterinary and emergency. Cass rang the buzzer. A moment later, a drowsy voice crackled over the intercom. "We're at capacity for non-emergencies, unless your cat is literally on fire." "Toby, it's Cass. Open the door." There was a pause, a buzz, and the lock clicked. They stumbled into the waiting room, which smelled of antiseptic, wet dog, and stale coffee. A young man with messy brown hair and scrubs that looked 3 sizes too big came out from the back. Toby adjusted his glasses, looking from Cass to the soaking wet older man. "Cass?" Toby rubbed his eyes. "I haven't seen you since the dropout party. What's going on? Who's the grandpa?" "Toby, this is Artie," Cass lied quickly. "He's a friend. We have a problem." Arthur straightened his spine, summoning the dignity that had commanded boardrooms for 40 years. "Young man, we need access to your toxicology equipment. Immediately." Toby blinked. We don't do human testing. This is for dogs. And also, no." Cass stepped forward, grabbing Toby's arm. "Toby, listen to me. Someone tried to kill him tonight. With this." She pulled the silver insulin pen from her pocket, wrapped in the napkin. "We think it's digoxin. If we can't prove it, he's dead. I'm dead." Toby looked at the pen, then at Cass's desperate eyes. He sighed, the weight of their friendship pressing on him. "If my boss finds out, I lose my residency. You know that, right?" "I'll pay for your tuition," Arthur blurted out. Toby looked at Arthur, then laughed nervously. "Sure, Artie, and I'll buy you a pony. Come on back." The lab was small, cluttered with microscopes and centrifuges. Toby took the pen with gloved hands, extracted a minute amount of the clear liquid, and placed it into a spectrometer usually reserved for diagnosing antifreeze poisoning in golden retrievers. "This machine is rudimentary," Toby muttered, typing on a keyboard. "But digoxin has a very specific molecular signature. If it's in there, it'll light up like a Christmas tree." They waited. The hum of the machine was the only sound in the room. Arthur sat on a metal stool, his legs shaking. Cass found a clean towel and draped it over his shoulders. "Thank you," he whispered. He looked at the walls, covered in anatomy posters of cats and horses. "You said you dropped out. What were you studying?" "Pre-law," Cass said, leaning against the counter. "I wanted to be a defense attorney. Fight for the little guy. Turns out, law school requires money, and the little guy usually runs out of that pretty fast." Arthur looked at her, really seeing the wasted potential. "My company. We have a scholarship fund for legal studies." "Yeah, I applied," Cass said dryly. "Rejected. Twice." Arthur winced. "I see. Don't worry about it, Mr. Sterling. The system is built to keep the gates closed. I just didn't have the right key." The computer beeped, a harsh, jagged sound. Toby spun around in his chair. His face was pale. "Holy—" "What is it?" Arthur asked, standing up. "Is this supposed to be insulin?" Toby pointed at the screen. The graph spiked violently in the red. "Because this is almost pure digoxin. The concentration is insane. If you injected this, you'd go into cardiac arrest within 3 minutes. It's not just poison. It's an execution." Arthur stared at the screen. The reality of it was no longer a theory. His best friend, Roger, and his head of security, Gideon, had tried to execute him. "Can you print that?" Cass asked. "Time-stamped?" "Yeah," Toby said, the printer already whirring. "But guys, you need to see this." Toby pointed to a small TV mounted in the corner of the lab, playing the local 24-hour news cycle on mute. He grabbed the remote and turned up the volume. The screen showed a photo of Arthur Sterling, an unflattering one where he looked angry. The headline in bold red letters read, "Billionaire missing, mental breakdown feared." The news anchor, a woman with a somber expression, was speaking. "Police have confirmed that Arthur Sterling, CEO of the Sterling Group, fled his own charity gala tonight after an apparent psychotic episode. Witnesses report he assaulted staff members and ran into the night. Sources close to the family say Mr. Sterling has been battling early-onset dementia and has refused treatment. He is considered confused and potentially dangerous. If seen, do not approach. Contact the tip line immediately." Arthur's face turned purple. "Dementia? Assaulted staff? I'm the most sane man in New York." "They're controlling the narrative," Cass said, her voice cold. "They know you're alive. They're painting you as crazy so that when you try to speak, no one listens. And if the police find you, they have an excuse to sedate you. Or worse." "Who is the source?" Arthur demanded at the screen. The camera cut to Roger Thorne, standing outside the Plaza Hotel, looking tearful. "We just want Arthur home safe," Roger said to the microphones. "He's been under so much pressure. We are working with Gideon Graves and private security to bring him in for the medical help he needs." "That snake!" Arthur hissed. "I was best man at his wedding." "We have to move," Cass said, grabbing the printout from the printer. "Toby, wipe the security footage of us coming in here. Do it now." "Way ahead of you," Toby said, typing furiously. "But Cass, if they're looking for him, they're looking for you too. They just showed a sketch of an unidentified accomplice." Cass looked at her reflection in the dark window. She wasn't just a waitress anymore. She was the most wanted woman in the city. "Thanks, Toby," she said. "If we survive this, he really will pay your tuition." "Just get out of here," Toby said, handing her a bottle of rubbing alcohol and a lighter. "Take the back exit. It dumps you into the alley near the rail yard." Cass and Arthur hurried to the back door. As Cass pushed the bar to open it, she froze. Through the narrow window of the door, she saw the alleyway. It wasn't empty. A black sedan was idling at the end of the alley, lights off. A man was standing by the trunk, smoking a cigarette. The cherry of the cigarette glowed in the dark. It was one of the men from the kitchen. "They found us," Cass whispered, backing away. "How?" Arthur whispered back. "They didn't track the phone," Cass realized with horror. "They tracked the sample, the medical network. Toby logged the chemical analysis into the cloud database. Gideon's system must have flagged the specific chemical signature of the poison instantly. They were trapped." "Is there another way out?" Arthur asked, his voice steadying. The fear was still there, but the businessman was waking up. He was used to hostile takeovers. This was just a physical one. "The front is too exposed," Cass said, her eyes darting around the storage room. "The back is covered." She looked up. The ceiling. It was a drop ceiling with acoustic tiles. "The roof," Cass said. "This building is a single story, but it's connected to the old warehouse next door. If we can get to the roof, we can jump the gap." "Jump?" Arthur looked at his dress shoes. "Cassidy, I am 62 years old." "And you're worth $12 billion, she snapped, dragging a heavy crate of dog food under the maintenance hatch. "Think of it as the most expensive jump in history. Up! Now!" She boosted him. It was undignified, struggling and grunting, but Arthur managed to haul himself into the crawl space. Cass followed, pulling the hatch shut just as the back door smashed open. "Clear the rooms!" a voice shouted below. "No witnesses!" Cass put a finger to her lips. They crawled across the dusty beams, the sound of boots heavy on the linoleum below. They reached the roof access hatch and pushed it open, spilling out into the cold rain. The roof was black tar, slick as oil. To their left, the neighboring warehouse loomed, a brick structure about 4 feet away and 2 feet lower. "It's not far," Cass said, yelling over the sound of the rain. "Just step and push." Arthur looked down. It was only a 2-story drop, but enough to break a leg or a neck. He looked back at the hatch. He could hear them climbing up. "I can't believe I'm doing this," Arthur muttered. He took a breath, closed his eyes, and leapt. He landed heavily on the other side, rolling awkwardly. Cass followed, landing with the grace of someone who had hopped subway turnstiles her whole life. "Move!" she urged. They scrambled across the warehouse roof and down a rusty fire escape, dropping into a side street 3 blocks away from the vet clinic. Sirens were wailing in the distance. Police, fire, maybe Gideon's private cleanup crew. They huddled under the awning of a closed deli, catching their breath. "We need a car," Arthur said. "We can't walk to Manhattan. The bridges will be watched." "We can't take a car," Cass countered. "Traffic cameras, license plate readers. Gideon owns the city's surveillance grid. You paid for it, remember? The Safe City Initiative?" Arthur groaned. "I really need to stop funding things that come back to kill me." "We need to get underground," Cass said. "The subway is risky, but the service tunnels—" "No," Arthur interrupted. He looked at a discarded newspaper in a trash can, then at the deli window. He saw his own reflection, haggard, wet, pathetic. Then something clicked in his eyes. The predator was back. "Cass," he said, his voice dropping. "Stop thinking like a fugitive. Start thinking like a CEO." "What?" "Gideon expects us to hide. He expects us to run to the police or the press. He's guarding the bridges and the tunnels. He's watching the perimeter." So we don't sneak in," Arthur said. "We walk in, but not as Arthur Sterling and his waitress." "I don't follow." "What time is it?" Arthur asked. Cass checked her watch. 4:30 a.m. "The morning shift," Arthur said. "The Sterling Tower. It's a city within a city. 5,000 people work there. But before the bankers and the lawyers arrive, who gets there first?" Cass looked at her own uniform, hidden under a borrowed oversized coat. "The cleaners, the catering staff, maintenance." "Exactly," Arthur smiled, a sharp, dangerous smile. At 5:00 a.m., the delivery trucks arrive at the loading bay. Produce, linens, waste management. It's the busiest time for the service dock. You want to sneak in on a garbage truck? No, Arthur said. I own the largest commercial laundry service in the tri-state area. Sterling Linens. They service the tower every morning at 5:15 a.m. Okay, Cass said, seeing the plan form. But the drivers will know you. The drivers, maybe, but not the hoppers, and certainly not if we're wearing the uniform. Where are we going to get sterling linen uniforms at 4:30 in the morning in Long Island City? Arthur pointed down the street. There. Cass looked. Parked in front of an all-night diner was a massive box truck with the blue and silver logo. Sterling Linens. The driver was inside the diner, hunched over a plate of eggs. That's convenient, Cass said. That's logistics, Arthur corrected. That truck is on its break before the final run into the city. We need to get into the back of that truck. They ran toward the diner. The rain was letting up, replaced by the grey, pre-dawn fog. The truck was idling. The back door will be padlocked, Cass said. Arthur examined the lock. It's a master key system. I have the master code. In my head. But it's a keypad. He punched in a 6-digit code. The light blinked red. Changed it, he cursed. Standard protocol every 6 months. I haven't been down to operations in a year. Step aside, Cass said. She looked around, grabbed a discarded piece of rebar from a nearby construction pile, and jammed it into the hasp of the lock. She didn't try to pick it. She used it as a lever. Talk, she grunted, putting her entire body weight into it. Physics. With a sickening screech of metal, the hasp snapped. It wasn't elegant, but it worked. They threw open the rear doors. The truck was filled with canvas carts of crisp, clean tablecloths and chef coats. Get in, Cass hissed. They scrambled inside, burying themselves behind a wall of laundry carts, just as the diner door opened. Hey, the driver shouted. Who's back there? Cass froze. Arthur held his breath. The driver walked around to the back. He grabbed the handle of the door. He didn't look inside. He just saw the door was unlatched. Damn latch is broken again, the driver grumbled. He slammed the rolling door down, plunging them into absolute darkness. The engine roared to life. The truck lurched forward. We're in, Arthur whispered in the dark. Yeah, Cass said, leaning back against a bag of linen. But now comes the hard part. We have to get past the security checkpoint at the tower. Gideon will have dogs. He'll have scanners. I know the building, Arthur said, his voice echoing in the metal box. I built it. There are things in the blueprints that Gideon doesn't know about. Anomalies. Anomalies? When we laid the foundation in '98, we found an old Prohibition-era tunnel connected to the sub-basement. We were supposed to fill it with concrete. I didn't. Why not? I'm a historian at heart, Cass. I couldn't destroy history, so I walled it off. It looks like a solid concrete wall in the laundry receiving room, but it's false. Behind it is a lift that goes straight to the executive penthouse. My private panic room elevator. It bypasses the main security grid entirely. And you think Gideon doesn't know about it? Only 2 people knew about it. Me and the architect. Where is the architect? He died 10 years ago. Arthur paused. If we can get from the loading dock to the sub-basement laundry room without being seen, we can take that lift straight to the boardroom. We'll pop out right behind the head of the table. Just like a magic trick, Cass muttered. The truck hit a pothole, bouncing them violently. Arthur, Cass asked in the dark, if we make it, if you sign those papers, what happens to you? I lose control of the company, Arthur said softly. The board is dissolved. The assets go to the trust and I retire. I lose my power. But the company's soul is saved. You're giving it all up. I'm realizing tonight, Cassidy, that I gave it up a long time ago. I let men like Gideon and Roger run my life while I played the figurehead. Tonight is about taking it back, even if it's just for one signature. The truck began to slow down. The noise of the city outside changed, the echoey sound of a tunnel. We're at the Midtown Tunnel, Cass said. We're crossing into Manhattan. Suddenly the truck came to a harsh stop. They heard muffled voices outside. Checkpoint, a heavy voice said. Open the back. Cass grabbed Arthur's arm. Gideon? Maybe, Arthur whispered. Or just police. Stay down. The rolling door rattled. Light flooded in as the door was thrown up. A flashlight beam cut through the darkness, sweeping over the laundry carts. Just laundry, officer, the driver's voice said nervously. Deliveries for the Sterling Tower and the Hyatt. The beam of light moved closer. It hit the cart Cass and Arthur were hiding behind. I need to check the interior, the guard said. We have an alert for a fugitive. Cass held her breath. She gripped the insulin pen in her pocket, her only weapon, useless as it was. Boots stepped onto the metal bed of the truck. Clomp, clomp. The guard was moving the carts. He was 3 feet away. Arthur looked at Cass. He grabbed a clean white chef's coat from the bag next to him. He mouthed, "Put this on." He grabbed one for himself. "Hey!" the guard shouted, pulling a cart aside. Cass and Arthur sat there, wearing ill-fitting white chef coats, holding clipboards Arthur had miraculously pulled from a side pocket of the cart. Arthur looked up, squinting into the light. "Do you mind? We're trying to do inventory. This driver is late, and if the napkins aren't at the plaza by 6, it's my ass." The guard paused. He saw 2 people in uniform, looking annoyed, holding clipboards. It was the camouflage of the working class. The guard didn't see a billionaire and a fugitive. He saw 2 tired laundry workers. "ID?" the guard asked, skeptical. "I don't carry my wallet in the back of a truck," Arthur snapped, channeling his inner irritable middle manager. "Call the supervisor if you want, but tell him you're the reason the Sterling breakfast service is delayed. Name's Henderson." The guard hesitated. The threat of delaying a billionaire's breakfast was a powerful deterrent in this city. "Get out of here," the guard grunted, stepping down. "Clear." The door slammed shut. The truck lurched forward. Arthur exhaled, a long, shuddering breath. "I haven't been that scared since the crash of '87. "You're a good liar," Cass said, impressed. "I'm a businessman," Arthur corrected. "Same thing." The truck rumbled deep into the city. They were inside the perimeter. Now, they just had to get into the heart of the beast. The Sterling Linens truck hissed as the air brakes engaged, backing into the cavernous loading dock of the Sterling Tower. The sound was deafening, a mix of reversing alarms, shouting dock workers, and the grinding of metal. To Arthur Sterling, who usually entered this building via the private helipad or the marble-floored lobby, this was an alien world. It smelled of diesel fumes, wet cardboard, and industrial cleaner. Inside the dark cargo hold, Cass nudged Arthur. "Put the clipboard up. Look bored. You're just a guy trying to get through his shift." Arthur adjusted the collar of his ill-fitting chef's coat. "I can do bored. I've sat through 20-hour merger negotiations." "Different kind of bored," Cass whispered. "You need to look like you hate your life, not like you own the building." The rear door rattled and rolled up. The dock was bustling. Men in jumpsuits were tossing bags of trash into a compactor. Forklifts beeped frantically. "Let's go," Cass muttered. She grabbed the handle of a heavy laundry cart. "Grab the other end. We have to look like we're working." Arthur grabbed the canvas rim. It was heavy. He grunted, the strain pulling at his back. He hadn't lifted anything heavier than a golf club in 30 years. They pushed the cart down the metal ramp, the wheels clattering loudly. "Hey, you two!" A dock foreman with a clipboard and a hard hat stepped in front of them. He was a mountain of a man with a thick beard. Arthur froze. Cass squeezed the cart handle. "You're late," the foreman barked. "Service elevator B is backed up. Take C, and don't scratch the paint in the hallway again, or I'm writing you up." "Sorry, boss," Cass said, pitching her voice lower, adding a rougher edge to her Queen's accent. Traffic in the tunnel was a nightmare. Yeah, move it." They pushed past him, blending into the stream of workers. They navigated the concrete corridors of the sub-basement. This was the circulatory system of the skyscraper, the pipes, the wires, the ducts that kept the luxury above functioning. "Where is it?" Cass whispered, scanning the endless grey walls. "The main laundry distribution room," Arthur said, his eyes darting around. "It should be past the boiler room, left at the next junction." They turned left. The heat rose instantly. The boiler room hummed like a sleeping dragon. Suddenly, Arthur stopped. He pulled Cass behind a stack of wooden pallets. "What?" Cass hissed. "Look," Arthur pointed. At the end of the corridor, standing outside the double doors of the laundry room, were two men in dark suits. They weren't wearing earpieces. They were wearing tactical vests under their jackets. They were holding submachine guns low against their thighs. "Gideon's men," Cass breathed. "He knows." "He doesn't know where we are," Arthur reasoned, his mind racing. "But he knows the building. He knows if I'm coming back, I have to come from the bottom up. He's locked down the elevators." "So we can't get to the secret lift?" "The secret lift entrance is inside that laundry room," Arthur said, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Behind the false wall." They were 50 feet away, separated by a well-lit corridor and two armed guards. Cass looked around. She saw a fire alarm pull station on the wall. "Too obvious. It shuts down the elevators." She looked up. A sprinkler pipe ran along the ceiling. "Arthur," she whispered, "do you know how the fire suppression system works here?" "Halon gas in the server rooms, water everywhere else," Arthur recited. "Why?" "If I trigger a localized sprinkler," Cass said, eyeing a lighter she had pocketed from Toby's clinic, "does it trigger the whole building?" "No, just the zone, to prevent water damage to other floors." "Perfect." Cass grabbed a linen napkin from the cart. "I need a distraction. I'm going to set off the sprinkler in the hallway behind them. When they turn to look, we rush them?" Arthur looked at her like she was insane. "Rush them? They have machine guns. I have a clipboard." "No," Arthur corrected himself, his eyes hardening. "We don't rush them. We outrank them." "What?" "Give me the cart," Arthur said. "You stay here. When I signal, you run for the door." Before Cass could stop him, Arthur Sterling pushed the laundry cart out from behind the pallets. He didn't slouch. He didn't look like a worker anymore. He walked straight down the center of the corridor, pushing the cart with a rhythmic, noisy clatter. The two guards snapped their heads up, raising their weapons. "Halt!" one shouted. "Area off limits." Arthur didn't stop. He kept walking, his face hidden by the shadow of the hallway and the brim of a borrowed baseball cap he'd found in the truck. "I said halt!" The guard racked the slide of his weapon. Arthur stopped 10 feet away. He slowly let go of the cart. He stood up to his full height. "Gentlemen," Arthur boomed, his voice echoing off the concrete. It was the voice that had silenced the New York Stock Exchange. "You are standing in front of my laundry room." The guards hesitated. They knew the voice, but the context was wrong. Arthur stepped into the light. He took off the cap. His hair was messy, his face smudged with grease, but the face was unmistakable. "Mr. Sterling?" the guard on the left stammered. The gun lowered slightly. "Put that away," Arthur commanded, walking toward them. "Before I have your pension fund liquidated and your children rejected from every private school in the tri-state area. It was a gamble, a massive bluff. Gideon's men were mercenaries, but they were paid by the Sterling Corporation. They were trained to protect the CEO, and old habits died hard. For a second, the hierarchy held. The guards looked at each other, confused. Gideon had told them Sterling was crazy, dangerous, but he looked in charge. "Sir," the guard said, "Mr. Graves said—" "Mr. Graves is fired," Arthur snapped. He was 5 feet away. "Now open that door." The guard reached for his radio. "I need to call it in." "Don't," Arthur warned. That was the moment the spell broke. The guard's earpiece crackled. "Target potentially in the basement. Lethal force authorized." The guard's eyes widened. He raised the gun. "Sir, get on the ground." Clang! A heavy steel pipe smashed into the back of the guard's knees. Cass had flanked them while they were paralyzed by Arthur's monologue. She swung the pipe like a baseball bat, dropping the first man. The second guard spun around. Arthur, fueled by a night of terror and adrenaline, shoved the heavy laundry cart with all his might. It slammed into the guard, pinning him against the wall. "Go!" Cass screamed. She grabbed the keycard from the groaning guard's belt and swiped the door. It beeped green. They tumbled into the laundry room and slammed the door, engaging the deadbolt. Bullets sparked against the steel door a second later. Bang, bang, bang. "They're going to blow the hinges!" Cass yelled. "The wall!" Arthur ran to the back of the room, past rows of industrial washers. "Here." He began frantically feeling the concrete bricks of the back wall. "It's a pressure plate. The 3rd brick from the floor. 7th from the left." He pushed. Nothing happened. "Arthur!" Cass shouted. The door behind them was denting inward. "It's stiff! It hasn't been used in 20 years!" Arthur kicked the brick. Cass ran over and kicked it with him. 1, 2, 3! They kicked together. The brick clicked. A hydraulic hiss filled the room. A section of the concrete wall, 3 feet wide, slowly swung inward, revealing a dark, velvet-lined elevator car. They dove inside. Arthur slammed a red button on the panel. The concrete door groaned and began to close. Through the narrowing gap, Cass saw the laundry room door fly off its hinges. 3 men burst in. They raised their weapons, but all they saw was a solid concrete wall sealing shut. The lift began to ascend, smooth, silent, and fast. Cass slid down the velvet wall, sitting on the floor. She was shaking. "We made it." Arthur leaned against the brass railing, gasping for air. "We're not there yet. This lift goes to the penthouse. The boardroom is on the 40th floor. We have to take the stairs down 2 flights from my office." The elevator hummed. They were rising through the spine of the building, bypassing 50 floors of security, cameras, and betrayal. Arthur looked at his reflection in the mirrored ceiling of the elevator. He looked at the chef's coat, the dirt, the blood on his knuckles. "Cassidy," he said softly. She looked up. "Whatever happens in that room," Arthur said, "I want you to know. You didn't just save my life, you saved my soul." "Don't get sentimental on me, Artie." Cass managed a weak smile. "Just get your company back." The elevator chimed. The doors opened. They weren't in a basement anymore. They were in the penthouse suite, a world of white marble, modern art, and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city they had just crawled under. Arthur walked to his desk. He opened a hidden drawer and pulled out a fresh shirt and a blazer he kept for emergencies. He stripped off the chef's coat. "How do I look?" he asked, buttoning the blazer. He was still wearing the dirty tuxedo pants and muddy shoes, but from the waist up, he was the CEO. "Like a boss," Cass said. She smoothed her uniform. "Let's go crash a meeting." The silence in the 40th floor boardroom was suffocating. At the head of the table, Roger Thorne pushed the restructuring papers toward the hesitant directors. "Arthur is gone," Roger said, feigning sorrow. "We must protect the company." "Sign." But the lock on the private service door clicked. "I wouldn't do that, Martha," a voice thundered. The door swung open. Arthur Sterling stepped in, muddy, bruised, and wearing a mechanic's jacket, but radiating absolute authority. Cass stood right beside him, clutching the evidence. Roger turned ghost white. "Arthur, you're unwell." "I'm not unwell, Roger. I'm furious." Arthur tossed the silver insulin pen onto the polished mahogany table. It slid to a halt in front of the board. Cass stepped forward, slamming the toxicology report down next to it. "It's not insulin," she announced, her voice cutting through the room. "It's a lethal dose of digoxin. The fingerprints on the cartridge belong to Gideon Graves. The FBI already has the digital copy." Panic flashed in Gideon's eyes. The security chief realized the trap had snapped shut. With a feral growl, he drew a concealed blade and lunged at Arthur. Cass didn't hesitate. She grabbed a heavy crystal water pitcher from the table and swung it with all her might. Crash! The crystal exploded against Gideon's skull. He collapsed amidst water and glass shards. Just as the main doors burst open, NYPD officers swarmed the room, guns drawn, tackling the disoriented hitman. As Roger was handcuffed, weeping into his hands, Arthur stood over the wreckage. He looked at Cass, who was shaking, staring at the shattered glass. "I broke another pitcher," she whispered. "I'm definitely fired now." Arthur smiled, a look of genuine freedom washing over him. He took her hand, addressing the stunned board. "On the contrary," he declared, "you're the only person here who just earned a promotion." And that is the incredible story of how a single whisper changed the fate of a billion-dollar empire. It shows us that courage can come from the most unexpected places, and that sometimes the person serving the food is the only one who sees the poison. Arthur Sterling learned that loyalty can't be bought, and Cassidy Miller proved that you don't need a CEO title to be a leader. If you enjoyed this roller coaster of suspense, betrayal, and redemption, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a story. Share this video with a friend who loves a good thriller. What would you have done if you were in Cass's shoes? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.